function to test, which is delete project. And what I'm actually going to do in this video is I'm going to skip the create and updates, and I'm just going to do the rest of the delete. So delete project, delete feature, and delete user story and delete task, because they're going to be pretty similar and we can kind of make up some time. Okay, so we're going to say delete project. All right, so if we look at this function, we've already tested the project service delete function. So right now, all we're doing is testing if when this input comes in, is the input passed to this function and is it called? Okay. So we can go ahead and say should return a delete result after deleting, calling the delete project method in project's service. All right, so let's add our function to do the testing, and then we're going to start doing our inputs first. So const project ID, let's say that's 1. We're going to say const user ID, let's say that's 15. All right, then we want to have our const delete result, which is going to be I don't remember. So I'm going to go into delete user and copy this delete result and paste it in there. Then we are going to do projects service dot delete project dot mock resolved value, and then we're going to mock it and say that what's coming back from that service here is going to be the delete result. Okay, then we can actually call our service function now. So const result is equal to service dot delete project, and then we will pass in the project ID and the user ID. Now we expect that the result is going to equal the delete result. We expect that the project's service dot delete project, we expect that it has been called, and we expect that the project's service dot delete project has been called with the project ID and the user ID. All right, let's go ahead and run our tests now and see if we passed. Oh no! All right. Oh, we didn't add an await here. Let's go look at the error to make sure. And yeah, you can see that what we're getting is a promise. So that means we didn't wait for the result to resolve before we returned it. All right, 30 out of 30 passed. All right, so that is going to be our delete project. Okay, so I'm going to open up this create feature just so we know where we're at when we come back, but I'm going to move on to the rest of our delete ones because I think that we will be able to kind of work faster doing a similar test suite. Okay, so this is now going to be delete feature, and it's going to be a little bit different. So it should delete the feature and then return the updated project. Okay, so let's take a look. We are passing in a feature ID, not a project ID here. All right, feature ID. And then we are going to pass in a user ID as well. All right, so the first thing that we're going to get back is, we're going to call the delete feature function, which you can see that we are deleting it, and then we are going to return a project ID. So this is going to return a project ID. We already tested what the feature service does, so all we have to worry about here is saying that const project ID is equal to 1. Okay, so let's change this feature to like 3. All right, just for funsies. All right, so then now that we have the project ID, it's going to call the project's service, get project by ID with the project ID, and then it's going to return that. And so what we want to do is we want to have the project here. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this. And so it's going to return a project with statuses. So we need to go look at where we have, so here we have gets project, and we have a whole object with projects with statuses. So I'm going to steal this, and I am going to go here, and I'm going to add it. And I'm going to go let my dog inside, so pause for just a moment. Don't miss me too much. All right, sorry about that. He was very mad at me and barking outside. Okay, so we were looking at the project that's going to get returned here from the entire function, okay? So now let's go ahead and take a look at this project, and we're going to edit it a little bit because here we're saying we deleted feature 3. So let's make sure this doesn't have a feature 3 in it. And it doesn't, so that works. It ends on feature 2, so that makes sense that we deleted feature 3, okay? And then this is going to be projects with status, so we're just going to delete the array here. Let's shrink this. So I think we just messed that up. Okay, so let's shrink that. And then let's get this and delete it. All right, that looks good. So we have 2 features in one project, and we have a project with status. Okay, so then here we're gonna say that we're mocking the, nope, that doesn't, we're just gonna delete this whole line because it doesn't make sense. All right, so in order to get the project ID to be 1, we're gonna mock this delete feature. So it's gonna be features service dot delete feature, and then we are going to say dot mock resolved value, and then we're going to say that we want to return the project ID, okay? We have one more thing to mock here too. We're gonna mock projects service dot get project by ID, and then we are going to pass in that project's ID. All right, then we are going to, nope, I don't know why I did that. We're going to, that is what essentially is going to happen here, but here we are just saying what we're mocking to come back. Mock resolved value, and then we are going to mock the project with statuses. All right, it is mad. Okay, so let's go to get project by ID, and let's return promise any. All right, so now, yep, it's not mad about this anymore, so that's perfect. All right, so then we're going to say const result is equal to service dot delete feature, and then we're going to pass in the feature ID and the user ID. All right, we expect the result to be project with statuses. We expect, and I'm going to copy this here, and we're going to say features service dot delete feature to have been called, and we expect features service dot delete feature to have called with the feature ID and the user ID. All right, then we expect projects service dot get project by ID to have been called, and we expect projects service dot get project ID to have been called with the project ID. All right, let's run the test. We typed a lot, so no worries if we don't pass, but woohoo, we passed. All right, so that is going to be the delete feature. All right, now we're going to close that, and we can go ahead to delete user story here. All right, and it's going to be very similar to delete feature, so hopefully we don't have to do too much. All right, so delete, this one's gonna be delete user story. Should delete the user story and then return the updated project. So this is gonna turn into a user story ID. Let's go ahead, and it looks like we have user story 1, user story 2. We do have a user story 3 here, so that shall work. And then we have user ID, that's fine, 15. It looks like we do not need to worry about project ID here. So that's good. All right, so then we have user story 1, user story 2. So the user story 3 is going to be deleted here. All right. So even though that doesn't really matter for it just helps for readability. Okay, so here instead of features service, we will be mocking user stories service dot delete user story, and we will mock the resolved value project ID still. So that is going to be const project ID is going to be 1. Then we will still call project services, get project ID, and then we're going to mock the resolved value of projects with services. All right, so now we can actually call delete user story with the user story ID and the user ID. We expect the result to be equal to projects with statuses. And then here we're going to change this to user stories service. And then we are going to change this here to user story. And then we will change this here to user story ID. All right, let's give that a try. I don't know how I feel about it because we did that quick, but wow, we are on top of our game today. All right, so this is going to be perfect for our testing user story. All right, let's go ahead and try to finish up our last one. All right, so this one's gonna be a little bit more complicated, but that is okay, because it's not testing the exact same thing here. So we actually don't need a project with statuses this time, so I'm gonna delete that. We don't actually need a project ID this time either. So honestly, let's just start from scratch here. All right. So we are going to be doing the test for delete task. So it should delete the task and then return the corresponding user story status and its updated task list. Perfect. All right. So it looks like we deleted that. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is our inputs. So we're going to say const task ID equals, say 3. Then we're going to say const user ID. We're going to say 15. All right, the next thing, it looks like we're going to have 3 different variables here. So let's go ahead and type those up. So we're going to say const user story ID. Let's just say 1 for simplicity. Then we're going to say const, spelled const wrong per usual. I try to type as fast as I talk when I'm like talking and coding, and I feel like I make more mistakes than when I'm not talking. I feel like I don't like rush as much to type. So you guys, if anyone's listening to me at this point, let me know if you feel like I should slow down my talking to make less typos, or if you like the speed at which I'm going and the typos are just like what's gonna happen. All right, let's see. Then we have story status. All right, so let's look at what this function is doing. So we are passing in the user story ID, to get user story status by ID. And then that's going to have the status. Okay, I think I understand what it's doing in general, but I don't really understand the syntax, that it will use. So I'm actually going to go in and look at what that story status is going to be. Okay, so it's just going to be completed task length out of task count. Okay, so we are deleting the task first and then getting the user story ID with it. Then we are going to go and get the status, which is going to be a string, which is number of tasks length, completed task length. So we're at, let's say, 2 out of 2. All right, we'll say both tasks are done out of the task count. Okay, so that's story status. So then we can do const updated user story is going to be equal to an object. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to steal one of these user stories, this, and I'm going to go back up to here, and I'm going to paste it in and see if we can just edit it. So here's going to be the user story. You can see user story 1, that makes sense, task count 2, and then we're going to have to do completed count 2. All right, so we have tasks 1 and task 2, and then both of these are supposed to be done. If we're mirroring, trying to make sure all of our data is matching. All right, save that, shrink it. Okay, so now we have the updated user story. So then what we can do is we can say const return object, and that's going to be an object with story status, and then task list is equal to updated user story dot tasks. Okay. Now we need to figure out the data that, or we need to like make the mock statements so that way the functions return what we want them to return. Okay. So the first one we're calling is tasks service dot delete task, and we want that to mock the resolved value of user story ID. Okay. The next one that we're going to mock is user story service dot get user story status by ID, and then we're going to pass in the user story ID. I don't know why I'm passing in anything. Being so silly. Mock the resolved value, and then we are going to, the resolved value is going to be story status. It's like my brain is having a hard time like reading what's happening here to try to figure out what's coming back and then like not copying the code. It's weird. Okay, so now user story service again is called, and that's get user story by ID this time, and then we're going to mock the resolved value updated user story, which it doesn't like, so let's go to updated user story. Oh, it's just gonna, it's not giving me the statuses. So let's get rid of this. Is that all? Okay, so status. So ID, number, name, string, description, string, tasks, array, with object of ID, number, name, string, status, done. This is interesting because I don't see a difference. What if I do as user story? All right, perfect. so I just needed to write that that's what that was. All right, next we can then actually call the function. So we're going to say call service constant result is equal to await service dot delete user story, and then we will pass in, let's go back to our delete task, and then we will pass in the task ID and the user ID. Now we expect that our result is going to equal return object. All right, let's go ahead and run the tasks and see what happens. Perfect. That's awesome that that worked. All right, so now we need to talk about what we expect to have been called and what we expect it to have been called with. So we expect delete task tasks service dot delete task to have been called, and we expect tasks service dot delete task to have been called with. All right, so we're calling it with the user story ID. All right, so I'm going to just copy this then and paste it, and instead of tasks service, we expect user story service dot, instead of delete task, we expect get user story status by ID to have been called and to have been called with story status. All right, I'm going to run the test and see how we're doing so far. No. Expected 1 but received 3 and 5. Get user story. So let's 3 and 15. Okay, user story status by ID. User story status by user story ID. I'm losing my mind over here. All right. Nope. Number of calls, 1. Did we just have user story ID? Here, I'm gonna back up and do this. Let's just do this. Oh, because it's mad at tasks service. All right, so I'm still going to delete this here. I'm going to run it again. Make sure we're not too far off. All right, yeah, so it's mad at tasks. I'm just reading it wrong. So it doesn't like that it's been called with user story ID because that's what it's being. All right, so this error now makes a lot more sense. So I put in what the mock resolve value is, and I should have put in this. All right, so now let's try. Perfect. All right, so now we expect the user story service dot get user story status by ID. We expect that that has been called with. Now let's go take a look at the function. The user story status by ID is called with the user story ID. So we'll put that there. Let's go ahead and check this before we move on. Nice. All right, so then we expect, oh my goodness, the user story service dot get user story by ID to have been called. And we expect it to have been called with, all right, get user story by ID. We expect it to be called with user story ID. All right, and let's run. Nice. All right, so that is going to wrap up this video for delete task. We have all 3 deletes for project, delete feature, delete user story, and delete task done. So now when we return in the next video, we'll move on to create. All right, talk to you soon.